Hello, my name is Carter Langston, and with the help of my partners Maddie Phillips and Sam Willard, we will be giving a detailed look at Nagoya and Himeji castles. I will first start off by giving a chronological history of each castle, and then we'll pass it on to Sam for a more detailed look at Nagoya Castle, and then Maddie will take over for a more detailed look at Himeji Castle. Here is a brief chronological history of Himeji Castle. In 1333, the hill in which the castle was first built is first fortified. The castle then went through a series of changes due to different people being in charge of that land due to a series of different battles. In 1581, the famous three-story castle is added by leader Toyotomi Hideyoshi. From 1601 to 1609, the castle is remodeled by Ikeda Terumasa, the son-in-law of Tokugawa Ieyasu. This is largely the castle we see today after it was remodeled by Ikeda Terumasa. Throughout the coming years, many different people added to and fortified different parts of the castle to make it what it looks like today. In 1878, Shigeru Nakamura applies for preservation of Himeji Castle, and due to this, funds were allocated for the upkeep of the castle. In 1910, Meiji-era renovations were carried out on the castle, and in 1931, parts of the complex are listed as a National Treasure of Japan. In 1945, Himeji Castle remains unharmed in air raid war bombings, and in 1993, Himeji Castle is listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Here's a brief chronological history of Nagoya Castle. From 1610 to 1612, construction begins on Nagoya Castle, and it was built for Tokugawa Ieyasu's ninth son. From 1612 to 1615, construction on the Hamaru Palace takes place. In 1633, construction of the Hamaru Palace's Jorokuden and other extensions are built on the castle. In 1872, the Imperial Army gains control of the palace and its tower keeps. In 1893, control of the palace is transferred to the Imperial Household Agency. In 1930, the tower keeps and the Hamaru Palace are designated national treasures. In 1942, the screen paintings in the palace are designated as national treasures as well. In 1945, Nagoya Castle is destroyed in air raid bombings. In 1959, there are rebuilt efforts for the towers due to the destruction. In 2009, restoration work on the Hamaru Palace takes place, and in 2018, the Hamaru Palace is opened back up to the public. I will now pass it off to Sam for a more detailed look at Nagoya Castle.
After winning the Battle of Sekigahara and becoming shogun, Tokugawa Ieyasu ordered the construction of Nagoya Castle to act as both a symbol of power and a military facility. This militaristic intent can be seen in the location of the castle. Ieyasu placed Nagoya Castle at the intersection of two historic roads, Tokaido and Nakasendo, giving Ieyasu control over this important travel hub. The design of Nagoya Castle also highlights its use as a military facility. High walls and multiple watchtowers surround the castle. The picture on the left is the southwest corner watchtower, Seinansumi Yagura. Some important features of Nagoya Castle include the golden Shachihoko tigerfish ornaments on the top of the main tower keep, which you can see at the top of the slide, and the Tokugawa clan symbol, a circle with three leaves that is used everywhere in the architecture, from doors to roofs. Honmaru Palace, the main living quarters, has 13 structures, 30 rooms covering 3,100 meters squared. During World War II, the castle was used as a military base. Bombed in 1945, Honmaru Palace, the main tower keep, and the main gate were destroyed. Honmaru Palace was rebuilt in 2018 using architectural plans and other historical resources for authenticity. Meanwhile, the main tower keep and main gate were rebuilt after the war in 1959. The main tower keep was rebuilt instead using steel reinforced concrete. The steel reinforced concrete was meant to make the building stronger, but instead made it weaker to the effects of earthquakes. Consequently, the tower keep is now closed due to the structural problems, and the city has plans to rebuild the main tower keep in its original wooden form in hopefully 2024.
Alright, so to tell you a little bit about Himeji Castle, it is one of the first UNESCO World Heritage Sites and is the largest and most visited castle in all of Japan, which is why it's so famous. originally in this spot there was a castle called Himeyama Castle, which was built in 1346 by an ancient ruler of the Himara province in this area named Satonori Norimura. But then, after a series of remodels and additions by different lords living in the castle, the current Himeji Castle was finally completed by about 1618. It served as a private residence for the current lord living there and as a symbol of power to the surrounding area. It is extremely large, with about 83 buildings in the surrounding area surrounding the main castle, and the main castle is a 6-story structure. And even though it appears like it only has 5 floors on the outside, because the 4th and 5th floor are not separated by a roof like most of the other floors. It has many feudal militaristic features and was built to be fortified during wartime, even though it was never actually used in a war. We'll get into these more in the next slide, but just to name off a few of them are the massive stone foundations and the thick plaster walls, the 3 moats. So there's 1 moat around the main castle in the middle, and then 2 moats around the greater surrounding area to protect on multiple different levels. And then there were also different paths along with the moats, and some of them led to dead ends to trap any intruders so that they could be attacked if anybody tried to attack the castle. It was also at a high vantage point on the top of a hill so that they had the high ground and could see any intruders coming. But again, none of these qualities actually came in handy because it was never actually used for battle. One of the other things that is so interesting about this castle is that it was almost destroyed many times, but the main structure that stands today is still the original structure, unlike many other castles that have been completely destroyed and rebuilt. So in 1817, some of the rooms were destroyed to make room for Japanese army barracks. This was during the fall of feudalism, and many Japanese castles were destroyed because of that. So it was then set to be demolished by government policy, but ended up being put up for auction instead. The castle was then purchased by a Himeji resident for only 23 Japanese yen at the time, which converts to about only $2,250 today. The buyer wanted to demolish it, but it ended up being more expensive to do that than just keeping it intact, so it stayed intact. And then it was heavily bombed at the end of World War II in 1945, and most of the surrounding area completely burned down, but the main castle structure remained mostly unharmed. There was even a firebomb said to have dropped on the top floor of the castle, but failed to explode. And then lastly, most of the city of Himeji was badly damaged during the 1995 earthquakes, but because of the construction of the Himeji Castle, it remained basically unharmed from the earthquakes. Lastly, it was recently closed for a few years ago for restorations, but reopened to the public in 2015. And then to go shortly into depth about a couple of the construction techniques used on the castle, it has wooden framing with 2 large main support columns that run throughout most of the castle. So one of them is pictured here in this left image. Each column is 24.5 meters tall with about a meter in diameter. They extend all the way from the basement to the bottom of the 6th floor of the castle. This, as mentioned before, this type of construction also makes the castle more earthquake resistant, as the beams are allowed to slide and move slightly to absorb the blow of an earthquake, as opposed to modern construction where that is less favorable. And then in the middle you can see the diagram of the walls of the castle. This was used a special type of construction called komai that uses bamboo trellis framing with mud layers and plaster layers on top of that. This made the walls very strong and also thick. At the bottom layer of the castle, the walls were almost 45 centimeters thick, and then they got thinner as they went up. So on the top floors, they were only 30 centimeters thick. The Himeji Castle was also special in that the walls were covered with plaster on both the inside and the outside of the castle, whereas most castles built during this time only had plaster on the outside. This also helped with fire resistance. And then lastly, the stone walls are a signifier of just the new age that the castle was built in, as most of the castles built before this were only fortified with earth embankments and moats. But in this castle, you can see the stone walls as a sign to keep up with the development of new firearms and the need for stronger defense. And that's all we have for you. Thank you for your time, and thank you for listening.